way that, do it once, do it right. That's not something we've done in New Zealand for a really long time. But we can again if we change the government.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to call Dr. Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's a pleasure to take my first call here, and I want to talk to two of the supplementary order papers. Yes, that's right, Mr. Faafoi, the first of many calls. To talk to two of the supplementary order papers that seek to make amendments in Part 1 of this legislation. The first is to return to the definitional debate that seems to have broken out over what a crop is. And I'd just like to make the point that actually throughout government we do have very tight definitions within our research, science and technology system of what a crop is as opposed to a pasture. For example, Mr. Chairman, I was once an employee of crop and food research. We certainly didn't delve into pasture or forestry, that was seen as an entirely different enterprise, and in fact research that was undertaken by other research institutions because it was seen as so separate and so different. We have a very accepted definition of what a crop is in this country, and it certainly doesn't include pasture, and it certainly doesn't include forestry. I'd also like to respond to perhaps what was one of the more interesting attempts to bring someone over to vote for a SOP that I've ever seen in the House, and just remind the member Marama Fox that actually Labor will be supporting this SOP that she's putting up. We don't actually think it's going to achieve what it needs to do, but Labor will in fact be voting for it. So in terms of the allegations that we're not voting for it, I'd just like to correct those and make it clear that the Honourable David Parker had made it clear that we would be voting for that SOP. Perhaps my colleague, the Honourable Ruth Dyson, is correct that she wasn't speaking. I wasn't listening. I'd also like to speak to supplementary order paper number 283 in the name of Eugenie Sage that has been put forward, and to signal that the Labor Party will be supporting the supplementary order paper. What this amendment to the legislation does is it would enable the Minister and consent authorities to consider greenhouse gas emissions and the effect of climate change when deciding applications for discharge consents and marine consents and developing national environmental standards, regional district plans and regulations. We think that it is vitally important that any piece of legislation that is meant to be the centrepiece of how we practice sustainable management in this country, that when we're amending it in the 21st century here in 2017, that we're having due regard for climate change and ensuring that we are making sure that the Minister can consider the effect of greenhouse gas emissions on there. That the supplementary order paper is a very well-crafted supplementary order paper, and I'd like to congratulate the member that has put it forward, that it has looked at, it does not alter the current provisions of the RMA, which do allow the decision makers to consider the effects of climate change for the benefits of renewable energy. What it does is it puts further amendments into this legislation where more consideration could be given and where actually more difference could be made. So I hope that parties across the House are looking at this supplementary order paper, Minister, and thinking about the benefits that this could bring to bear. And I'd be interested to hear the Minister's thoughts on this, and whether or not that the RMA is indeed a tool that we could be further using to fight the effects of climate change, and would be very interested in the Minister's thoughts on that. It amends Clause 13 of the legislation to add climate change and greenhouse gas emissions to Section 32 of the RMA, which seems a very sensible way to do that. Sections 70A and 10E of the RMA limit consent authorities' consideration of the effects of proposed activities in increasing greenhouse gas emissions, so new clauses introduced under this SOP would change that, Mr Chairman, and it seems to me a very sensible way to do it. The amendment to Clause 4 would make it clear that a contaminant is defined in the Act does indeed include greenhouse gases. Because if we're thinking about what a contaminant is in the 21st century, I think all of us would need to think about greenhouse gases and what that can do as well. So, Mr Chairman, I think that this is a good supplementary order paper. It is one we are supporting. I'd like to remind members to perhaps listen to speeches in this House, that it is a fiery debate, but actually be correct when you say what people are voting for. No quicker way to lose support for a supplementary order paper than the speech such as we saw. But, Mr Speaker, Labour will be supporting both of them.
Calling up Dennis O'Rourke.
I want to talk about the